Is this about the cleaning contract? Get this black woman out of our lobby right now. She's making the partners highly uncomfortable.
Preston Brackett. The fourth barked it across the marble, slamming his heavy leather binder down onto the granite reception desk in one aggressive burst of motion. Vivian Sterling did not flinch. She sat glacially calm on the gray sofa, her hands resting over her portfolio. Slowly turning a worn gold ring on her finger, Grant Holloway lunged forward, crowding into her space, his face twisting with pure condescension as he hissed at her.
People like you keep thinking you belong in a platinum-level firm. Look at your plain suit, honey. We don't do charity consultations or walk-ins for support staff here. Go back to the service elevators where people of your color belong before I have security drag your black skin onto the street.
They thought she was completely worthless. They had absolutely no idea that the quiet black woman sitting right there under their noses was the self-made billionaire founder and chief executive of a $34 billion investment fund. She was the exact anchor investor they had been sweating over and desperately waiting for. The one piece of capital that could save their dying house. In exactly 11 minutes, a single blue-backed contract on that granite desk would withdraw a $500 million commitment, bring this arrogant 93-year-old dynasty to its knees, and end a family name forever. Before we get to those 11 minutes, before the contract, before the color drained out of Preston Brackett's face, you need to understand who that woman on the sofa really was. Because every single person in that lobby looked at her and saw nothing. And that was the most expensive mistake any of them would ever make. So let me take you back. Let me tell you about Vivian Sterling, or at least the version most people meet first. The version they decide on before she ever opens her mouth. 44 years old, 5'7", the kind of woman who holds a door for whoever is behind her, and who says good morning to the man, emptying the trash before she says it to the man signing the checks. She drives herself. A clean, dark sedan. Nothing that turns a head. And she parks it herself. In the public garage, 2 blocks out. Because she likes the walk. And because she has never once in her life needed a valet to tell her she had arrived. She wears plain suits, charcoal, navy, a single good watch she bought for herself, no logos shouting from anywhere on her body. And when she sits down in a waiting room, people assume things. They assume she is there to interview for a job. They assume she is somebody's assistant, sent ahead to hold a place. They assume more times than she could ever count, that she is simply lost. She lets them. That part matters. So hold on to it. Vivian is married to Idris, a high school principal who still grades papers at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night, and who still believes, after 20 years, that the right teacher in the right room can bend a child's whole life upward. They have one daughter, Zora, 12 years old, all elbows and opinions, who has recently decided that her mother's job is, and I quote, boring rich people stuff, and who has no idea, none, what her mother actually does for a living. So what does Vivian do? I run a small investment fund. That is what she tells people. Every neighbor, every parent at Zora's school, every stranger who makes the mistake of small talk on an airplane. A small investment fund. It is the most forgettable sentence on earth. And that is exactly why she uses it. You hear small investment fund, and your brain files it somewhere next to regional sales. and moves on. Nobody digs. Here is the truth. She does not volunteer. Sterling Meridian Capital manages $34 billion, not 34 million. Billion. With a B? When Vivian Sterling decides to move money, pension funds in 3 states feel the floor shift under their feet. When she takes a meeting, the other side of the table cancels their afternoon. She is, by every single measure that the men in glass towers use to size each other up, more powerful than nearly every person who has ever mistaken her for the help, and she built it from nothing. I do mean nothing. Now, here is a detail that seems small, and is not. On Vivian's right hand, 4th finger, she wears a thin gold band, no stone, worn so thin in one spot that you can actually see the place where 40 years of scrubbing wore it down. It belonged to her grandmother, Adaise, the woman she was named for. And every single morning, Vivian slides it on and turns it inward, so the band rests against her palm, where only she can feel it. Idris asked about it once. She told him, "It keeps my hands honest." That is technically not a lie. Keep that ring in the back of your mind. Trust me on this one, because Adias Sterling cleaned office buildings for a living. 30 years. Downtown, the financial district. She rode the late bus in at 9 o'clock at night with a cart full of supplies, and she rode it home at 5 in the morning. And in between, she mopped the marble lobbies of the very towers, where men in suits decided who got money and who got told. No. She emptied their waste baskets. She wiped down their glass. And she was, to almost every one of them, our furniture, a presence you stepped around without ever seeing. The way you step around a potted plant. She used to bring her granddaughter to work on the nights there was no one to watch her. Little Vivian. Cease. 7, 8 years old. Falling asleep on a bench in a lobby that cost more than the building they lived in, while her grandmother ran a buffer over the floor in slow and patient circles. And one night, Vivian still tells this story, but only to 2 people on this earth. Her grandmother knelt down next to that bench, gold ring catching the after-hours light, and she said this, "Babe, one day you are going to walk through a door like this, and they are going to tell you that you do not belong. And on that day, you remember whose hands kept these floors clean. You remember that you were already in this room before any of them. You hear me?" Vivian heard her. She heard her through public school. She heard her through the scholarship, and the part-time jobs, and the nights she studied finance from textbooks she could not afford to buy. So she read them, standing up in the library until they closed the doors. She heard her through the first job, where they hired her to answer phones, and were shocked. When the temp turned out to understand the trades better than the analysts. She heard her through the years they passed her over, and the years she watched lesser men collect the promotions she had earned, and the day she finally stopped waiting for a door to open and built her own building around herself. Let me show you one of those years, because the highlight reel always skips the part that matters. She was 23. The job was a temp contract. 6 weeks. Answer the phones. File the trade tickets. Do not speak unless spoken to. On her 4th day, she was carrying coffee past a glass conference room when she heard 4 senior men arguing over a position that was bleeding money. She stopped. She looked at the board through the glass. And before she could talk herself out of it, she knocked, stepped inside, and said, very quietly, "Your hedge is on the wrong side." The room went silent, the way rooms do when a temp says the thing a managing director should have caught. She was right. She walked them through it. The correlation they had assumed, the correlation that actually existed, the 8 figures sitting in the gap between the two. By the end of that hour, she had saved that desk more money than the firm would pay her in 3 years. You would think that would be the beginning of something. Here is what actually happened. They kept her. Of course they kept her. They moved her off the phones and onto the desk. And they used her. Used is the honest word. As a kind of quiet, secret weapon. The one they would walk a thorny book past, just to see what she saw. And every single year at review, when she asked about the title, about the path, about the seat she had already earned 3 times over, she got the same sentence in a slightly different suit. You are just not quite ready yet. Not wrong. Not unqualified. Just not quite ready. The phrase that has ended more careers than incompetence ever has, because there is nothing in it to fight, nothing to grab. It is folk. It is a door that is technically open and that you somehow can never walk through. She heard not quite ready for the better part of a decade. And then, one ordinary morning, she stopped asking other people for the title. It took her 11 years to build the firm that would print it on her own door. 11 years. And a name carved over an entrance that no front desk on earth could ever tell her she did not belong to. So when Vivian Sterling walks into a marble lobby, and a young woman at the front desk looks her up and down and decides she is no one, Vivian does not flinch. She has been in this room before. She was in it before any of them. Now, let me tell you about the building she is walking into. Because to understand the crime, you have to understand the house where it happens. Brackett and Crane. Established 1931. Their name is cut into the granite over the door in letters a foot tall. And below it, smaller. The kind of motto that families like this one pay men to write for them. Stewardship. Discretion. Permanence. For 93 years. Brackett and Crane managed old money for old families. The kind of firm where the client's grandfathers knew the partner's grandfathers. Where deals were closed on handshakes at clubs that did not put their names on the door. Because if you had to ask, you were not getting in. At its peak, it managed $60 billion. And answered to no one. That was the peak. This is not the peak. In the last 6 years, Brackett and Crane has bled a bad bet on a sector that cratered. 2 senior partners who left and took their clients with them. A compliance scandal. Quiet. Settled. Buried. But the kind of quiet that makes the smart money start drifting toward the exits. They are down to 40 billion and falling. Mandates are not being renewed. The pension funds, the endowments, the sovereign money, they are all looking at Brackett and Crane. The way you look at a grand old hotel with water stains spreading across the ceiling. Beautiful. Historics. And you are not booking a room. The firm needs an anchor. Badly. It needs one enormous, blue chip, credibility restoring investor to plant a flag and tell the rest of the market, this house is still standing, still safe, still worth your money. One anchor. And the drift reverses. No anchor. And within 18 months, the name over the door becomes a footnote. And the granite gets sandblasted off for whoever buys the floors. That anchor, the one piece of capital that keeps the lights on, is supposed to walk through the door this very morning. Now, the man whose family name comes first on the granite, Preston Brackett IV, 56 years old, born into this, raised in this, inherited this. His great-grandfather founded the firm. His grandfather grew it. His father ran it. And Preston was handed the chair the way other men are handed a coat, held open, slid onto the shoulders. No effort required. He has never built a single thing in his life that he did not begin by already owning. Preston is good in a room, charming, tall, silver at the temples, with the easy confidence of a man who has never once been told to wait. He remembers the names of his clients' children. He gives a beautiful toast. On paper, he is a perfect chairman, but pull the firm's numbers, and the paper starts to smell. In 93 years, Brackett and Crane has had 41 partners. 41. Every single one of them white. Every single one of them a man until 1998. And only 6 women since. Read that one back to yourself. 93 years. 41 partners. Not a single black face among them. Not one. Preston would tell you that is just how the talent shook out. He would tell you the firm hires the best. Full stop. That it is a pure meritocracy. And he would tell you this with his hand on his heart in a way that would almost make you believe he believes it. And that is the thing you have to understand about Preston Brackett. He does not think he is a bigot. He would swear on his father's grave that he does not have a racist bone in his body. And he would mean it, all the way down. But what a man believes about himself and what the record says about him are 2 entirely different conversations. And Preston has never once been forced to sit through the second one. Want to see what that second conversation looks like? For once, there is tape. 4 years ago, Preston sat on a panel at an industry conference. A moderator, a pitcher of water, 300 people in the audience, and, as it happened, a camera running quietly in the back of the room. Someone asked him the polite version of the hard question. Why, at the very top of finance, does everyone still seem to look the same? And Preston? Varm, relaxed, utterly certain, leaned into the microphone and gave the answer he has been giving his entire life. We do not see color here. We see talent. We always have. This place is a pure meritocracy. The audience nodded. A few of them actually clapped. There it is. The man's entire self-image, in high definition, on the record, and sitting directly underneath that sentence, in that same 93-year-old building, was the number you just heard. The 41, the not one. Preston said the word meritocracy into a microphone while standing on top of a statistic that called him a liar. And he never once felt the floor move. That is the thing about the second conversation. The men who most need to hear it have arranged their entire lives so that they never will. And here is the part that should sit in your chest. Somewhere in that conference hall, in the audience, sat one of Preston's own vice presidents, a black woman. She had brought 2 of the firm's biggest clients in a decade through that supposedly open door. And she had watched men she personally trained walk straight past her into partnership, while she was told, year after year, that she was doing great, really great. She sat in that room and listened to her chairman describe, to 300 strangers, a building she walked into every single morning and did not recognize. She did not say a word. What was there to say? You cannot argue a man out of his own good opinion of himself. It is the most fortified position on earth. And the drawbridge has been up since the day he was born. So she went home that night, and she did the only thing left to do when the record disagrees with the powerful, and no one with authority will look at it. She started keeping her own. Preston's right hand is Grant Holloway, 49 years old, Chief Operating Officer, the man who runs the machine while Preston runs the room. Holloway is the one who approves the promotions, signs off on the hiring slates, and reviews the complaints that come up through human resources. He has been doing it for 8 years, and he does it the way most people sign for a delivery. He does not open the box, does not check what is inside, just scribbles his name and moves it along. Every promotion that looked like every promotion before it, approved. Every complaint that might have made things complicated, reviewed, resolved, closed. Next, then there is the front desk. Whitney Pruitt, 28, sharp, ambitious, and very good at reading a room and deciding instantly who matters and who does not, which is exactly the skill the job rewards, and exactly the skill that is about to end 3 careers, including, very nearly, her own. Whitney's whole instinct is to be the velvet rope, to know on sight who gets waved through and who gets parked. She is good at it, and she is about to be catastrophically wrong. And in the back, at a desk too small and a title too junior, there is Emily Tran, 24, first-year analyst, 5 months in, and still figuring out which conference rooms have the good chairs. On her very first day, a senior associate gave her the only piece of career advice anyone at Brackett and Crane had ever bothered to give the new analysts. Keep your head down. Keep your mouth shut. And learn. Emily is going to learn something this morning. Just not what anyone planned. And one more. The one nobody is thinking about, which is exactly the point. Cassandra Okafor. Everybody calls her Cass. 38 years old, a vice president at Brackett and Crane, which sounds impressive, until you learn she has held that exact title for 7 years while men she trained sailed right past her into partnership. Cass is, by a wide margin, the most talented portfolio mind in the building. She is also the only black woman above the level of administrative staff in the entire firm, and she knows, the way you know the weather, exactly what that means, and exactly what it has cost her 3 times in 3 years. Cass Okafor walked up to Human Resources and filed a complaint. Documented, dated, specific. The promotion that went to a man with half her track record. The client meeting she built and was not allowed to attend. The culture fit conversation where she was told, gently, that she could be a little intimidating. 3 complaints. All 3 were investigated. Internally. By the firm. About the firm. All 3 were closed. No wrongdoing found. 3 for 3. A perfect record. If you are the firm, Cass keeps copies. 3 thin folders. In a drawer at home. In date order. She is not even sure anymore why she keeps them. Maybe just so that one day, someone will believe her. That day is closer than she thinks. It is a Tuesday, just past 8:40 in the morning. Vivian Sterling has been thinking about this meeting for 2 months, but not the way you would think. Sterling Meridian has been quietly studying Brackett and Crane for half a year. Vivian's team has run the numbers cold. The bleeding mandates, the buried scandal, the bones of a once great firm that still has real value underneath the rot. And Vivian sees something the market does not. She sees a house worth saving, not for sentiment, but because the underlying portfolios are sound, and the brand, restored, is worth a fortune. She is prepared to do something almost no one else in the country has the capital or the nerve to do. She is prepared to anchor them. $500 million. Committed. Cornerstone. With her name on it, which means far more than the money. Because when Vivian Sterling plants a flag in a firm, the rest of the smart money follows the flag. It would save Brackett and Crane. It would, very literally, keep the granite over the door. The terms are already done. Her side has already signed. This morning is the handshake, the in-person, look them in the eye final meeting that old houses like this one still insist on, because that is how it has always been done. Her people set it for 9 o'clock. They told the firm, simply, that the principal from Sterling Meridian would be coming in personally to close the principal, V. Sterling. That is how the deal documents read, because that is how Vivian has always signed. First initial, last name. A habit from the years when a full first name on a resume got it moved to the bottom of the pile. A habit she kept long after she stopped needing it, because she liked watching what people assumed. So here is what Brackett and Crane knows this morning. They know that the most important investor in the 93-year history of the firm, the one who keeps them alive, is arriving at 9 o'clock. They know the initial. They know the number. They do not know her face. And they have already, without thinking about it for one single second, decided what that face is going to look like. It is going to look like them. It always has. Vivian wakes at 5:30. The way she always does. She makes coffee and drinks it, standing at the kitchen window, in the dark. Idris comes down at 6. Kisses the top of her head. Asks if today is the big one. She says every day is the big one. He laughs, because he knows that is both a joke and completely true. Zora thunders down at 7. Inhales a bowl of cereal. Complains about a group project. And tells her mother, sincerely, that she looks fine. She guesses, for the boring rich people stuff, Vivian dress, charcoal suit, the good watch, and the ring onto the 4th finger, turned inward, band against the palm. She looks at it for a second longer than usual. One day, you are going to walk through a door like this, and they are going to tell you that you do not belong, not today. Grandma, she says to the empty kitchen, but thank you for the warning. She drives herself downtown. She parks in the public garage, 2 blocks out, and at 8:52 in the morning, Vivian Adiza Sterling, granddaughter of the woman who used to mop the floor she is about to walk across, pushes open the glass doors of Brackett and Crane. 8 minutes early for a meeting that is going to end a man. She has no idea yet how long they are going to make her wait, But she is about to find out exactly how this house treats someone it has decided is no one. And so are they. The glass doors close behind her with that expensive, silent hush. The lobby of Brackett and Crane is designed to make you feel small, 40-foot ceilings, a single slab of black granite for a reception desk, fresh white orchids that cost more each week than some people make. And the floor is marble, polished to a mirror. The kind of marble that has to be buffed in slow circles by someone on the late shift, and Vivian feels her own footsteps echo across it. And she thinks, just for a second, of her grandmother's cart. Whitney Pruitt looks up from the desk, and the read happens instantly. You can almost watch it cross her face. The scan, the filing, the verdict, all in under a second. A black woman, plein suite, no assistant trailing behind her, no car waiting at the curb with a driver, alone, on foot, 8 minutes early. The verdict comes back in 2 words. Not a client. Can I help you? Whitney says. The words are polite. The temperature is not, good morning. Vivian says, I have a 9 o'clock with Mr. Brackett and Mr. Holloway. A flicker. Whitney glances at her screen, where the morning's calendar is sitting. Nine A. M. V. Sterling. Sterling Meridian. Principal. The single most important meeting on the books. And Whitney looks back up at the woman in front of her. And her brain simply refuses to connect the two. Because the meeting that is going to save the firm cannot possibly be her. And you're with which firm? Sterling Meridian. You're from Sterling Meridian. A small pause on the word from, just long enough to do its work. Are you here to drop something off? I'm here for the meeting. Vivian says, pleasantly, I'm a little early. I'm happy to wait. Whitney's smile is the smile of someone who has decided to be patient with a misunderstanding. Of course, if you could just have a seat. I'll let them know their 9 o'clock guest is, that someone is here. She gestures to the gray sofas by the window. It might be a few minutes. It is not going to be a few minutes. Vivian sits. She crosses her ankles. She sets her slim leather portfolio on her lap, both hands resting on top of it. The gold ring turned inward against her palm, and she begins to do the thing she has done in 100 rooms exactly like this one. She watches. She watches Whitney pick up the phone, turn slightly away, and murmur something. She does not need to hear the words. She has heard them before. In spirit. There's a woman here who says she's the Sterling meeting. No, I don't think so. She's by herself. Should I? Okay. Whitney hangs up and does not look at her again. Now, here is where Vivian Sterling does something that every black professional in America will recognize in their bones, even if they have never once had the words for it. She runs the choreography. She makes herself still and easy and unbothered. She does not ask again. She does not get up. She does not give this room a single thing it can use to call her difficult. She has run this exact choreography her entire career. She is fluent in it. And on a morning like this one, watching a firm decide who she is before she has shown them a single page, the choreography is not weakness. It is the longest con in the room. And she is the only one who knows the game has already started. 9 o'clock comes. No one comes for her. 9:15. A pair of men in beautiful suits walk in. Olda. White. The unhurried walk of money. Whitney is up and around the desk before they even reach it. Mr. Ashford, so good to see you. Can I get you anything, coffee? Water. Sparkling. They are ready for you right upstairs. And the men are gone. Swept up and in under 90 seconds. With a warmth and a speed that Vivian notes the way an accountant notes a number. She is still on the sofa. 9:40. A young analyst. Emily Tran, though Vivian does not know her name yet, comes down to retrieve a folder from the desk and notices the woman by the window. Emily hesitates. Something about it bothers her. The woman has been sitting there since before Emily's 9 o'clock stand-up, which means almost an hour, and no one has brought her so much as a glass of water. Emily almost says something. Then, a senior associate calls her name from the elevator bank, and the advice rings in her ears. Head down, mouth shut, learn. And she goes. But she looks back. Hold on to that. She looks back. There is one more person who sees her, and this one matters more than all the rest, even though it lasts less than a second. At 9:50, Cass Okafor crosses the lobby. She is moving fast, her head full of a trade. The way you learn to move through a building that has spent 7 years telling you that you are a little too much. She is not looking for anything. And then, near the window, she sees the woman on the sofa, sitting very straight, hands folded, holding a stillness that Cass recognizes before she can even name it. Because Cass has sat exactly that still, in exactly that kind of chair, keeping exactly that kind of composure together with both hands. Their eyes meet. Half a second. Maybe less. Cass has no idea who this woman is. She does not know there is a $500 million signature in that handbag. She does not know she is looking at the single most important person who will walk through these doors all year. She only knows what she sees. A black woman. Alone. Dressed for respect. Being quietly left to wait in a lobby that would never in 1,000 years leave a man in a camel coat sitting like that. And in that half second, something passes between them that has no words, because it has never needed them. I see it. I know. I have been in that chair. Hold on. Then Cass is past her. Into the elevator. Gone. Carried back up into the very same machine that is, at that exact moment, doing to a stranger, downstairs, the precise thing it has spent 7 years doing to her. Neither of them knows yet how this day is going to end, but they will both remember that look. 10:15. Vivian has not moved. Her phone has buzzed twice. Her assistant, confirming she has arrived, asking if everything is on track. She types back, running long on their end. I'm fine. Let it run. Because Vivian has decided something. She is not going to announce herself. She is not going to flash a credential, or drop the number, or demand the respect she is owed. She is going to let this house show her exactly what it is. Every firm tells you who it is. If you sit still long enough and let it, and she is sitting very still. And here is what very still lets her see. She counts. It is a habit from the desk. When you cannot act, you measure. Between 9 o'clock and 10:30, 11 people cross that lobby and pass within 10 feet of her. She counts every one. 11 people, and not a single one of them. Not the associates. Not the partners. Not the woman from facilities. Not the man refilling the water service 4 feet from her elbow. Offers the woman on the sofa so much as a glass of water. 11. Sit in that number for a second. The way she is sitting in that chair. One partner. Mid-40s. Crossing from the elevators to the front desk. Actually alters his path to go around the sofa. Steps wide. The way you step around a thing, you would rather not have to acknowledge. Espil, a sleeping stranger. Something the cleaners will handle. He does not look at her. Not looking at her is a skill he has clearly practiced. Vivian watches him do it. Feels her grandmother's ring against her palm. And thinks, there it is. That is the whole thing. Right there. In one man's footsteps. And then, at 10:20, the lobby teaches her the lesson. All the way down to the floor, a man walks in. White. 60s. Camel coat. The easy, slow walk of someone who has never once in his life wondered whether a room wanted him inside it. He gives his name at the desk. Caldwell. I have a 10:30. And watch what the building does. Whitney Pruitt, who has looked straight through Vivian for 90 minutes. Lights up. Of course. Mr. Caldwell. They are expecting you. Can I get you a coffee while you wait? Still. Or sparkling, please. Have a seat. It will just be a moment. Within 90 seconds, a young associate appears to walk him up personally. Coffee in a real cup. A hand on the shoulder. So good to see you again. Sir. Mr. Caldwell waited 90 seconds. Vivian has been sitting in that chair for the better part of 2 hours. In a suit that costs more than that man's car, with a signature in her bag that could save this entire firm. And she has been offered nothing. Walked around and quietly filed by every person who passed into the one category this house has always reserved for a woman who looks like her. It is never one thing. That is what people who have never sat in the chair do not understand. No single moment in that lobby would survive a complaint form. It is the accumulation. It is 100 small subtractions in a single morning. Each one too small to name out loud. That add up to a sum you feel in the center of your chest. It is the thing that wears the ring thin from the inside. 10:50. Whitney finally walks over. Not to apologize. To manage. I'm so sorry for the wait. It's a very busy morning. Can I ask? Was your appointment confirmed? Because I'm not seeing a guest pass requested for you. And I'd hate for there to have been a mix-up on your end. On your end? There it is again. Even the wait is being quietly reassigned as Vivian's fault. It was confirmed. Vivian says, by Sterling Meridian. For the principal. Right. And you're representing them today. Sort of an advance person. Something like that. Vivian says, and she watches the relief move across Whitney's face. Because advance person fits. Advance person is a category Whitney's brain can hold. The important Sterling money is still coming. This woman is just the help that got here early. And then Preston Brackett walks through the lobby. He is on his way back from a breakfast. Phone. In one hand, yak it open. The easy stride of a man who owns the floor. He is, frankly, on edge underneath the charm. Because the most important meeting of the year is now nearly 2 hours late. And the principal from Sterling Meridian still has not arrived. and his entire firm is balanced on this one piece of capital. He has been checking his phone every 90 seconds. He is starting to sweat through the confidence. He sees Whitney standing over a black woman on the gray sofa, and something about it, the wrongness of it, the way it does not fit the picture of the morning he is desperate to fix, snaps the last thread of his patience. He does not slow down. He crosses straight to the desk, and he slams that heavy leather binder down onto the granite. Hard. And he says it loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. Whitney, is this about the cleaning contract? Tell them we already have a vendor. He stops. He turns. And he actually looks at the woman on the sofa for the first time. And whatever he sees only makes it worse. No. You know what? I don't care what it's about. Get this black woman out of our lobby. Right now. She is making the partners highly uncomfortable. And I have a $500 million meeting walking through that door any minute. The lobby goes dead silent. Vivian Sterling does not move. She turns the gold ring once against her palm, and she says, very calmly, I'm not here about a cleaning contract. Mr. Brackett, I'm here for the 9 o'clock meeting. And that is when Grant Holloway steps off the elevator. Holloway is blunter than Preston, and he has far less charm to lose. He reads the room in a glance. His chairman flushed. A black woman on the sofa, refusing to be moved, and he decides, instantly, that he is going to be the one to handle it. He walks straight over, and he leans down into her space. Close. His face twisting with a condescension he does not even bother to hide. And he lets her have all of it. People like you, he says, keep thinking you belong in a platinum-level firm. Look at your plain little suit. Honey, we do not do charity consultations here. And we do not do walk-ins for support staff. So I am going to say this once. Go back to the service elevators, where people of your color belong. Before I have security, drag your black skin out onto the street. There it is. The quiet, polite, deniable version of this. The assumptions, the cold smile, the 3 hours in a chair, has finally dropped its mask and shown you the loud version that was underneath it the entire time. They are the same animal. One just wears a better suit. Vivian Sterling looks up at Grant Holloway. She does not raise her voice. She does not raise it, even a little, which is somehow so much worse than if she had. I understand exactly what you do here, she says. Holloway straightens up, satisfied, and turns to the desk. Whitney, get Doug up here. Doug is security. So now we have arrived at the exact moment. A black woman who flew no flag and made no scene, who has waited 3 hours in a chair without a single complaint, who walked in carrying the one piece of paper that keeps this firm alive, is about to be physically removed from the lobby by a security guard. On the order of the 2 men whose entire careers she is holding in the portfolio on her lap, and as Doug comes through the door, Preston Brackett, still flushed, still checking his phone for the investor who has somehow not arrived, points at the woman on the sofa and says it one more time. To make sure it is done, I said, get her out. She is making the partners uncomfortable. 11 minutes. Remember, that was 11 minutes ago. Time is up. Vivian Sterling does not stand up fast. That is the first thing. She does not leap to her feet, does not raise her voice. does not give them the angry black woman they have been quietly bracing for since the second she walked in. The one whose existence would have let every one of them off the hook. She rises slowly, smoothing her jacket. The way you stand when you are in no hurry at all, because you already hold every card at the table. Before Doug walks me out, she says, I think you should make one phone call. Mom. Holloway starts. Call Sterling Meridian. Vivian says, the main line, ask for the principal. Ask them to confirm where she is this morning. Something in the certainty of it makes Preston hesitate. Holloway, irritated, pulls out his phone to call her bluff, to end this, to prove the point. He has the firm's contact for the deal. He dials. It rings. A voice answers. Sterling Meridian, office of the founder. And Holloway, with a little smirk thrown sideways at Preston, says, yes, this is Grant Holloway at Brackett and Crane. I'm trying to locate Ms. Sterling. Your principal. We have a meeting this morning, and she has not arrived yet. And the voice on the other end says, pleasantly, Ms. Sterling left for your offices over 3 hours ago. Sir, she should have arrived around 8:50. Is everything all right? She is never late. Holloway's face does a thing. It is a slow thing. You can watch it happen. The smirk goes first. Then the color. Then the understanding climbs up his neck and into his jaw and behind his eyes. And his head turns. Slowly. Mechanically. Like it costs something. Toward the woman standing in front of him. The woman who has been in their lobby for 3 hours and 10 minutes. The woman he just told to go back to the service elevators. The woman they were 1 minute away from having dragged out by a security guard. That's right. Vivian says quietly, I've been here the whole time. She opens the slim leather portfolio. She does not rush. She removes a single document. Heavy stock. Blue-backed. The kind of paper old houses still use, because that is how it has always been done. And she lays it flat on the black granite of the reception desk, turning it so that they can read it right side up. It is the anchor commitment, $500 million. Sterling Meridian Capital. As cornerstone investor in Brackett and Crane, executed, signed, on the investor's line, in a clean fountain pen hand. V. A. Sterling, founder and chief executive officer. Sterling Meridian Capital. My name is Vivian Sterling, she says. To the silent lobby, to Whitney, frozen, behind the desk, to Doug, stopped in the doorway, to Grant Holloway, with the phone still useless in his hand, to Preston Brackett IV, who has gone the specific shade of gray that men go when the floor moves and there is nothing to hold. I'm the principal you have been waiting for. I'm the $500 million. I'm the meeting. You could hear a pin drop on that marble. I got here 8 minutes early. Vivian continues. And her voice never rises. Not once. Which is somehow so much worse than shouting. In the 3 hours and 11 minutes since. Here is what this house did. I was assumed to be lost. I was assumed to be a delivery. I was assumed to be applying for a support staff job. I was asked if I was the cleaning contract. I watched 2 gentlemen named Ashford get coffee, sparkling water, and a personal escort upstairs in 90 seconds. while I sat right here, untouched, not so much as a glass of water, for 3 hours. 11 separate people walked within 10 feet of me and offered me nothing. One of them changed his path so he would not have to step near me. I was told the mix-up was probably on my end. I was told to go back to the service elevators where, and I am quoting your chief operating officer exactly, people of my color belong. I was told that if I did not, you would have security drag my black skin out onto the street. And then the chairman of this firm pointed at me and ordered me removed because I was, in his words, making the partners uncomfortable. Preston opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Now, I want to be very precise about something. Vivian says, because I think it is the only part of this that actually matters. Mr. Holloway, at least, was honest. He said out loud, to my face, what this entire building had already spent 3 hours saying to me in complete silence. And it would be very convenient for all of you to decide that he is the problem, that you fire the one man who used the ugly words, and the rest of you get to stay exactly who you were this morning. So, let me take that comfort away from you right now. Long before Mr. Holloway opened his mouth, 11 different people looked at a woman sitting quietly in your lobby, in a good suit, early, for the biggest meeting on your calendar, and every single one of them decided I was no one. Not one of them raised their voice. Not one of them thought of themselves as cruel. They were, in their own minds, perfectly reasonable. That is the disease. The loud man, you can fire by Friday. The reflex that 11 reasonable people share. The one that looked directly at $500 million and could not see it because of the face standing in front of it. That is the thing that has run this house for 93 years. And today, it happened to make its mistake on the one person in this country who can make it cost you everything. She picks the document back up off the desk. I came here this morning to save Brackett and Crane. I mean that literally. My team has studied your books for 6 months. I know exactly how much trouble you are in. And I know exactly how little time you have. $500 million. With my name attached. And the rest of the market follows my flag right back through your doors. That commitment was signed on my side and ready to close. It would have kept the granite over your door. She uncaps the fountain pen. The whole lobby leans toward the sound, and then she caps it again, untouched, and slides it back into her jacket. I withdraw it. Vivian says, all of it. Effective now. Preston Brackett IV reaches out and puts a hand on the back of the gray sofa because his knees have stopped doing their job. He lowers himself down onto the edge of it. The same sofa, the exact same cushion, where a woman he ordered removed sat untouched for 3 hours, and he finally sees her. Now, here is what most people get wrong about a firm like Brackett and Crane. They think the danger is losing one deal. It is not. The danger is the signal. When Vivian Sterling walked out of that lobby, and she did walk out, unhurried, holding the door for the stunned young analyst coming in behind her. She did not slam anything. She did not make a threat. She simply went back to her office, 2 blocks away, and made 3 phone calls. Not angry calls, quiet ones. The kind of calls a woman who controls $34 billion is entitled to make. She called the 2 pension funds, who had been waiting to see what Sterling did before deciding whether to keep their own money at Brackett and Crane. She did not tell them the whole story. She did not have to. She told them. Simply, that Sterling Meridian had decided not to anchor the firm, that she would not be elaborating, and that they should make whatever decision was right for their beneficiaries. That is all it took. In the world Brackett and Crane lives in, Sterling passed, and she will not say why, is a death sentence spoken in a whisper. Within 72 hours, 2 mandates totaling over $1 billion gave notice. Within a week, it was 4. The drift the firm had been fighting for 6 years turned into a stampede. The thing about a house that runs on stewardship, discretion, and permanence is that all 3 of those words are really just one word: trust. And trust, once it starts pouring out of a building, does not pour slowly. And watch what Preston does with his 72 hours. Because it tells you everything about why houses like this one survive. As long as they do, he does not call Vivian Sterling. He does not get in a car and drive to Sterling Meridian and stand in her lobby for 3 hours and say the one true sentence: "I am sorry. We were wrong. It was us." That sentence never even forms. Instead, he does what his kind has always done. He calls people, old friends on other boards, a crisis communications firm on a Saturday, a reporter he plays golf with. He goes to work, not on the wrong, but on the story of the wrong. By Sunday night, there is a draft statement. Read it and count. The word regrettable appears 4 times. The word misunderstanding, twice. The phrase fell short of our standards, once, in the passive voice, so that no actual human being is doing the falling, and the word sorry, the real one, the one with a subject and an object, the one that says, "I did this to you," appears exactly 0 times. The entire document is engineered to do one single thing: convert a moral failure into a perception problem. Not, we treated a woman like she was nobody. Just unfortunate optics. Something happened. Mistakes were made. Binno won. And here is the terrible part. It almost works. It very nearly works the exact way it has always worked. The way it worked on the analyst before Cass, and the one before him. The machine quietly closing back over the wound until the water goes still and the name is forgotten. It almost works. Except for one thing Preston has completely forgotten to account for. A 24-year-old, in her first year, who watched the whole thing from the elevator bank, who went home that day and could not sleep, and who is, at that very moment, sitting at her own kitchen table, writing all of it down. But the money leaving is not the part that should stay with you. The part that should stay with you is what happened upstairs. Because somebody upstairs had a conscience, and her name was Eleanor Crane. Eleanor Crane is 74 years old, and the last living member of the founding Crane family. The and Crane, in Brackett and Crane. She sits on the board. For years, she has been treated, gently, as a figurehead, invited to the dinners, thanked in the annual report, and kept very far away from anything that actually mattered. She is sharper than every man on that board, and they have spent a decade pretending not to notice. Eleanor was in the building the morning Vivian Sterling sat in the lobby. She did not see it happen, but the next afternoon, she heard about it, and she did not hear about it from Preston. who had spent 24 hours frantically trying to bury it. She heard about it from a first-year analyst, Emily Tran. Remember Emily, the one who looked back. Here is what Emily did. And it is the hinge. The whole thing turns on. When the lobby cleared and the firm went into quiet panic, Emily Tran went back to her too small desk, and she could not stop thinking about the woman by the window. The woman she had almost brought a glass of water to, and didn't. Because, head down, mouth shut, learn. And Emily realized she had learned something. All right? She had learned exactly what this place was, and exactly what it had nearly turned her into: someone who sees a wrong and looks away to protect herself. So Emily did the thing that took more courage than anything else in this entire story. She did not have a badge. She did not have a recorder. She did not have $34 billion. She had a job she could lose, and rent she could barely make, and she risked all of it. She wrote it down. Everything she had witnessed. The times, the words, the 3 hours. Holloway calling for security. Preston's exact sentence. She typed it into a clean, dated, factual memo. And then, instead of sending it up the chain, where it would have died, in Grant Holloway's inbox, the way every inconvenient thing died, she walked it, on paper, to the one person in that building she believed might actually read it. She knocked on Eleanor Crane's door. "Miss Crane," Emily said, "I'm a first year. You don't know me, but I think you need to know what happened in our lobby yesterday. And I think if I send it the normal way, nobody will ever see it." Eleanor Crane read the memo twice. Then she looked up at this 24-year-old standing in her doorway with her whole career shaking in her hands. And she said, very quietly, "Thank you for your courage. Now, go back to your desk, and let me handle the people who have none." Emily Tran did not speak up fast enough to stop it. She would be the first to tell you that. She let a woman sit untouched for 3 hours, and she said nothing in the moment. But when the moment came afterward, to choose between her own safety and the truth, she chose the truth. And that choice cracked the whole thing open. Eleanor Crane called an emergency session of the board. Not by phone, in person. In the very conference room Vivian Sterling was supposed to have been welcomed into. And Eleanor, figurehead, footnote, the old woman they had all stopped listening to, stood up at the head of the table and laid it out. The lobby, the 3 hours, the withdrawal, the stampede of capital now bleeding out of the firm in real time. And then she laid out the rest. The part Preston had been praying. No one would connect to any of this. 41 partners in 93 years. And not one of them black. The 3 buried complaints from a vice president named Okafor. The pattern, the habit, the thing Sterling Meridian had walked straight into and exposed for exactly what it was. This is not a public relations problem. Eleanor Crane told the board, "This is who we have allowed ourselves to become. And the most powerful allocator in this country just sat in our lobby for 3 hours and watched us prove it. We do not get to fire one receptionist and call it solved. The receptionist did exactly what this firm trained her to do. The question on this table is whether this house still deserves the name carved over its door. And right now, gentlemen, my answer is no." The vote was not close. It is never close. Once the money has already decided, Preston Brackett IV was removed as chairman and chief executive. The 4th Brackett, to hold the chair. And the one who lost it, he did not go to prison. There is no law against the kind of slow, polite, institutional racism that took him down, which is its own bitter lesson. But his stock vested at a fraction of its old value. His name came off the door of the corner office that very week. And the thing that mattered most to a man like Preston, the unbroken line, his great-grandfather's firm passed cleanly to whoever came next, was finished. His father's portrait still hangs in the boardroom. Preston's never will. Grant Holloway was removed as chief operating officer for cause. 8 years of approving promotion slates and burying complaints without ever once opening the box came due all at once. When the board reviewed what he had signed off on, every shortcut, every no wrongdoing found, every complaint from Cass Okafor that he closed in 48 hours. There was no version of it that survived daylight. Holloway spent 8 years making sure the paperwork looked clean. In the end, it was his own paperwork that buried him. Whitney Pruitt was not fired. That surprised people. But Eleanor Crane made a specific point of it. The velvet rope did exactly what we hired the velvet rope to do. Whitney was reassigned, retrained, and this is the part that changed her. Required to sit through the full internal review and hear out loud what her 1-second verdict had nearly cost. She did not celebrate anything. She sent Vivian Sterling a handwritten letter that Vivian never answered and never threw away. And Doug, the security guard who was called to remove a $500 million investor from a lobby, Doug went home that night and told his wife the strangest story of his career. Doug was fine. Doug was just a man who got called to a desk. But Doug, too, learned something he would not forget. The firm did not die. That matters. And we will get to why, but the house that called itself Permanence came closer to the sandblaster that month than it had in 93 years. And every single inch of that distance was closed by a woman who never raised her voice, and a first-year analyst who finally raised hers. Here is where this story refuses to be. A revenge story. Because firing 3 people is not justice. Firing 3 people is housekeeping. Justice is making sure the room itself can never do this again. Eleanor Crane became interim chair. 74 years old. The figurehead they ignored. Now running the house her family built. And she had no intention of running it the way it had been run. She brought in an outside firm, not friends, not a club, independent investigators, with no relationship to Brackett and Crane, no golf games with the partners, no reason at all to find nothing. And she gave them one instruction: open every box Grant Holloway ever signed without reading. What they found will not surprise you, because you already know how this works. A promotion pipeline that had quietly routed around every candidate who did not look the part for decades. A complaint process where every grievance about bias was investigated by the very firm it was filed against. The financial world version of a department investigating itself and clearing itself every single time, and 3 thin files, dated and documented and dismissed. From a vice president named Cassandra Okafor, 3 complaints, 3 years. 3 times she was told nothing was wrong, so they brought Cass Okafor into the boardroom. Not to be managed, not to be settled with quietly, but to be heard. And Cass, who had spent 7 years being told she was a little intimidating for asking to be treated fairly, walked in carrying the 3 folders she had kept in a drawer at home, in date order, because some part of her had always believed that one day somebody would finally believe her. She set them down on the conference table. 1, 2, 3. 3 complaints. She said. 3 years. The first one was closed in 48 hours. I have kept these copies the entire time because I knew. I knew that the day someone finally checked, the firm's own files would prove that I was right. And they were lying. Well, someone finally checked. Everything I said was happening. It was all true. It was always true. And it took a woman with $500 million walking out of your lobby to make a single one of you open the drawer I have been pointing at for 3 years. Nobody in that room had an answer. There was no answer. And then Eleanor Crane did the thing that turned a scandal into a reckoning. She entered the firm by binding board resolution, with teeth, with real consequences for breaking it, into what amounted to a consent decree for itself. Not a press release, not a commitment to do better, a bending, structural rebuild, independent oversight of every hiring and promotion decision above a certain level. No more partners, quietly choosing partners who looked like partners. Every complaint of bias routed to an outside, independent body with the power to investigate and the obligation to report. No more house investigating itself and clearing itself. A complete teardown and rebuild of the path. A grievance travels, so that it could never again die silently in some Grant Holloway's inbox. And mandatory, recurring review of the firm's own patterns. The promotion data, the complaint data, the 41 partners problem, put in front of human eyes every year. On the record, with names attached, so that no one could ever again hide a habit inside a statistic. But Eleanor Crane did one more thing. The thing that separates a real reckoning from an expensive apology. She made them look backward. It would have been easy and completely standard to fix the pipe going forward and call it justice. New rules. Clean slate. We are a different firm now. Everyone keeps their job. The statement goes out. The past stays buried where the past is comfortable. That is what almost every institution does when it gets caught. And it is exactly why almost nothing ever actually changes. Eleanor refused it. She stood at the head of that table, 74 years old, the last living echo of the name carved over the door. And she said the firm was going to go back, 15 years back. They were going to pull every complaint that had been filed and dismissed, every promotion that had quietly gone sideways, every exit that no one had ever questioned. They were going to find the people the analyst pushed out in year 3, the associate who just was not a fit, the names the firm had spent 15 years successfully forgetting, and they were going to track them down, on a biwan, wherever they had landed, and look them in the eye, and finally say the sentence the firm had owed them all along. We knew, somewhere. We knew, and we let it happen to you. We are sorry. And here is what we are doing, so that it never happens to anyone again. Some of those people were gracious. Some of them slammed the door. Both reactions were earned, and the firm was made to receive each one without defending itself. Because that, too, was the point. This is what reform actually costs. Not a poster, not a slogan, not a committee with a clever name. It is an institution finally bending all the way down to pick up the full weight of what it did, the weight it had spent decades, making other people carry alone and carrying it itself. Out in the open, for as long as it takes, and Cassandra Okafor was offered the partnership she had earned 7 years and 3 complaints ago. She thought about it for a long time, and then she said no. She did not say no out of bitterness. She said no because a different door had opened, a better one. Eleanor Crane asked her to lead the new independent oversight function herself, the one with real power, the one that watched the watchers, the one that made sure the next Cass Okafor would never have to keep folders in a drawer for 3 years. Hoping a billionaire wandered into the lobby, Cass said yes to that, because punishing the people who wronged her was never really the point. The point was the next one. The point was always the next one. At the first meeting of the new oversight board, Cass Okafor opened her own file one last time. She did not read a statistic. She read a name, the name of the very first person before her who had filed a complaint about bias at Brackett and Crane and watched it vanish. A junior analyst, years gone now, pushed out so quietly that the firm had nearly forgotten he existed. This is who we are here for, Cass told the room. Not me. I'm fine. I'm sitting at the head of this table. I mean, every single person before me who walked into a room in this building and was told they were imagining it. Every one of them was right. Something was wrong. And now we are the ones who get to make sure it gets fixed. The firm did not die. By the time the rebuild was a year old, Capital had begun, cautiously, to return. Not the old money fleeing a sinking name, but new money that had read what happened and decided that a house willing to tear itself open and rebuild honestly might just be the only kind of house worth trusting with the future. Stewardship, discretion, permanence. For 93 years, those 3 words had been a costume. For the first time, the firm started trying to earn them, and the woman who started all of it never sent a single press release, never gave a single interview, never once put her name on the reckoning she caused. She just went back to work. The evening of the day, Vivian Sterling sat in that lobby for 3 hours. She drove herself home, 2 blocks to the public garage. Then the long way through downtown, past the towers, past the glass, past the marble lobbies glowing gold in the after-hours dark. The same lobbies her grandmother used to clean. She pulled into her own driveway. Zora came barreling out the front door before the car had fully stopped, 12 years old, full of some crisis about a group project. And Vivian got out and let her daughter wrap both arms around her. And she held her there, on the driveway, for a long time, longer than Zora expected, long enough that Zora pulled back and said, "Mom, you're being weird. Was the boring rich people stuff extra boring today?" Something like that, Vivian said, and kissed the top of her head. Idris was at the kitchen table grading papers when she came in. He looked up, read her face, the way 20 years lets you read a face, and did not ask the big question. He asked the small one. "You eat?" "No." He got up and started making her a plate. And that, somehow, was the moment Vivian Sterling finally let her shoulders down. Not in the lobby, not at the desk, not while $500 million walked out behind her, but but here, in her own kitchen, with a man warming up leftovers and not making her explain. Later, after Zora was asleep, the two of them sat on the couch, and Vivian stared at nothing for a while. I've closed deals in rooms that would make your head spin. She finally said, I've sat across from people who could end other people's lives with a phone call. None of it ever got to me. But sitting in a chair for 3 hours in the lobby of a firm, I came to save, being told I was the help, being told I was making people uncomfortable. In front of a desk, my grandmother used to scrub. She stopped, turned the gold ring on her finger inward against her palm. Idris put his hand over hers and did not say anything because he did not need to. And here is the part people forget. The part underneath all of it, Vivian Sterling controls $34 billion. She can move markets. She can save a firm. Or sink one. From a chair 2 blocks away. She has more raw power than nearly every person who has ever mistaken her for no one. And it did not make the sting go away. Not for 1 second. The money does not make it stop hurting to be looked at and dismissed in a country where your grandmother mopped the floor. What the power did was something smaller and more honest. It gave her somewhere to put it. That is the difference. That is the whole, entire difference. And it is exactly why this next part matters. More than any office Preston Brackett lost, Vivian Sterling was able to walk out of that lobby and bring a 93-year-old firm to its knees because she happened to be carrying a $500 million term sheet with her name on it. She had the capital. She had the leverage. She had 34 billion reasons that the men who dismissed her could not afford to be wrong about her for 1 more minute. But what about the woman who doesn't? What about the founder? Brilliant. Prepared. Twice as ready as she needed to be. Who walked into 40 pitch meetings with a company that was good, that worked, and heard 40 versions of no, not because the numbers were weak, because of who walked through the door. Because some man across the table did the exact same 1-second scan that Whitney Pruitt did. Defiled her under. Not for us, before she opened her laptop, and spent the rest of the meeting just waiting for it to be over. She did not have a signed commitment to slam down on the table. She had a pitch deck. And her word. And too often, her word was not enough. Because the numbers in the real version of this are not made up year after year of every single dollar of venture funding in this country. The share that goes to companies founded by Black women rounds down to almost nothing. Not because the talent is not there. The talent has always been there. It is the doors. It has always been the doors, and it is not only the doors of finance. That is the part you cannot allow yourself to forget once this story is over. It is the resume with a Black-sounding name that gets the callback at a fraction of the rate of the identical resume with a white-sounding name. Same words, same degrees, same human being, different name at the top. It is the mortgage quoted at a higher rate on the same income. The same credit, the same dream of a front porch. It is the patient whose pain is rated lower and medicated less by people who took an oath and who would be genuinely horrified to be called what they are being. It is the kid followed through the store by an employee who would tell you with total sincerity that they follow everyone exactly the same. Ask any one of them, the hiring manager, the loan officer, the doctor, the shopkeeper, and every single one will swear to you that they are being fair and most of them will believe it completely. That is not the loophole in the system. That is the system. It runs on a million people who are each entirely certain that they are not the problem, which is precisely why it is so hard to fight. And precisely why this story matters. Because you cannot file a complaint against a feeling. You cannot indict a default. There is no handcuff for. I just had a sense about her. The only thing on this earth that moves it is daylight, dragging the pattern up out of the private gut and into the public record, where it can no longer keep hiding inside 1,000 separate, innocent-looking moments. Vivian Sterling could force that daylight because she happened to walk in carrying $500 million. She had the standing, she had the leverage to make an entire room turn around and look at what it had just done. Most people who walk into that lobby do not. That is the whole reason her story has to be told loudly enough to carry theirs. So think about every black entrepreneur who got the long pause and the "let me circle back" that never circled back. Every qualified candidate whose resume went to the bottom of the pile because of the name at the top of it. Every person who sat in a marble lobby and got the polite verdict that they were no one, and then drove home and sat in their own driveway for 10 minutes, just trying to feel normal again. No $500 million. No leverage. No flag for the market to follow. Just their word. And too often, their word was not enough. The thing Brackett and Crane did to Vivian Sterling, the assumption, the dismissal, the 3 hours, the get her out. She is making people uncomfortable. That is not a special wrong. That only happens to billionaires who can punish it. It is the ordinary, daily, polite version of a much larger habit, and it lands every day on people who cannot make 3 phone calls and tear down a firm. It lands on people who just have to absorb it and keep going. Vivian Sterling could afford to be believed. The lesson is not that she won. The lesson is everyone who is owed the exact same dignity and cannot afford to demand it. Cass Okafor sits at the head of the oversight board now. At one of the early meetings, a younger employee, black, junior, terrified, the way Cass once was, came to her with a complaint, hands shaking, certain it would cost her everything. And Cass Okafor pulled out the 3 old folders she still keeps, set them down on the table, and said this: "Let me show you something. For 3 years, these were the only proof I had that I was telling the truth. You do not have to keep folders in a drawer anymore. That is what this office is for. Now, tell me everything. I believe you." That is what gets built when one person refuses to be made small, and one young analyst refuses to look away, and one old woman at the head of a table decides the name over the door has to mean something or come down. It does not fix the country. It does not fix the doors. It is one house, one rebuild, one drawer that someone finally opened. But sometimes, one open drawer is where it all starts. So now, I want to hear from you. And I mean really hear from you. Have you ever walked into a room and watched someone decide who you were before you said a single word? Have you ever been the one in the lobby? The one who was assumed to be lost, assumed to be the help, assumed to be anyone but who you actually are. What did you do? Did you have somewhere to put it? Drop your story in the comments. Because every single story matters. And somebody scrolling tonight needs to read that they were not imagining it. And listen, picture it for real. That is you. in that chair. 3 hours. Your grandmother's ring on your hand. Everything you built sitting in a folder on your lap. And some man you came to help. Telling security, you are making people uncomfortable. What would you do? Could you have stayed that calm? Could you have flipped that table? If this one hit you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. Because we tell these stories for a reason. And the reason is every person who was ever told they did not belong in a room they had already earned, for real.